Welcome to Dynamics CRM 2011 Install and Customize series. This is segment 7, Entity Relationships. Hello, I'm Stephen No. I'm a consultant and senior trainer specializing in Dynamics CRM solutions. I've been working with Dynamics CRM since version 3.0 came out back in 2005. I'll be your guide for this segment. On our agenda for the segment, we'll begin with entity relationship concepts, followed up with entity relationship behaviors. We'll discuss creating entity relationships, deleting them, and building complex relationships. We'll also work on something called entity relationship attribute mapping. And finally, we'll finish up with a resource page with some helpful links. The purpose of this segment is to make sure that you know how to use relationships to implement a data model. This includes the out-of-box relationships that are supported of one-to-n, n-to-one, and n-to-n, also known as one-to-many, many-to-one, and many-to-many. You'll use these constructs to build complex data relationships with the CRM user interface. And you'll know how to create, customize, and delete relationships. You'll also be able to use relationship behavior to customize data flow and provide relationship mapping to simplify the user interface and reduce the amount of keying from your end users. So let's take a moment and give you a quick demonstration of where CRM entity relationships appear within the CRM user interface. So relationships are another form of customizations. So to get to relationships, we go to Settings, Customizations, and Customize the System. We can then drill down into our entities and pick any entity that we like, because most of them out of the box do have relationships built in. In this particular case, we'll go ahead and pick the account entity. So now we're looking at the account entity. And if we drill down and take a look at the individual elements within the tree structure, you'll see that under account we have forms, views, charts, fields, which we've been in before, and 3 types of relationships. So if we go and review the relationships that are here, you can see that the out-of-box account has 39 predefined relationships. And these are all, right now, the primary entity is account, and related entities are always different entities. This is because we're in the 1-to-n relationships. In 1-to-n relationships, the primary will be the account in this case, and the related will be the related entity. Now we can also turn around and take a look at n-to-one relationships, which are basically the same thing as a 1-to-n, except you're looking at it from a different perspective. So these are the relationships that the account is the related entity, as you can see in this column here. And then finally, we'll take a look at many-to-many relationships, and the account entity has 2 of those as well. And one is to associate it with the original lead that was used to generate an account, and then also to show an account within a marketing list. So we're getting into the details of what n-to-one, 1-to-n, and n-to-n ultimately mean. But I wanted to go ahead and give you an idea of what they look like. So the other piece of this is we'll go ahead and drill down into a particular relationship. We'll start with a case where we have a parental relationship, and this is an example of the relationship itself. So the relationship is account to case. The primary entity is account, related entity is case. It has a schema name. There's a lookup field which is created in the related entity, and this lookup field has been being called customer. The requirement level is required, and the schema name is customer ID. And this lookup field is what contains the foreign key that's stored in the related entity that points back to the primary entity record that it's associated with. The navigation pane section allows us to define the appearance of the secondary entity or the related entity in the navigation area of the primary. Suffice it to say that this is how the relationship appears within the primary and related entities. And also we'll spend some time discussing relationship behavior, which is modeled here. So let's take a few moments and have an overview of entities and their relationships. So relationships are used to link entities and model data relationships in the CRM schema. Dynamic CRM direct relationships supported include the one-to-N or one-to-many relationship. In this relationship, there is a primary entity, which is the parent, and a related entity, which is the child. The relationship appears in the navigation pane of the primary entity, and it appears as a new relationship attribute within the related entity. So let's take a moment and show you what that looks like. This is a view of active accounts and sample data. So if I go ahead and open up the Grand Store sample record, which is an account, there's a number of things that we want to note that involve relationships. First of all, on the left-hand side of the navigation pane, each one of these entries on the left-hand side is considered to be the many in some form of relationship. In most of these cases, these are one-to-many relationships where the account is the one or the primary and the entity on the navigation pane is the many. So for instance, if we were to go look at our contacts, this defines a relationship between account and contacts where account is the primary and contacts is the related. If we click on the section of the nav pane, then this appears a list of all the contacts that are associated using this particular relationship. We can then drill down into George Sullivan and notice when we look at his record that his parent customer is Grand Store. Well, this is the actual relationship attribute that's created when a relationship is created. And it's been added to the form to make sure that you can select who the parent customer is and be able to get to them on the click of a button. So this is how relationships surface themselves within CRM. In a many-to-many relationship, this is a relationship between two related entities, so related to related. This means there is no primary entity. And so what happens is, instead of a relationship attribute getting created, that the related entities just appear in each other's navigation pane. We'll get into the details of how this is implemented later. So let's take a moment to discuss supported relationships in Dynamic CRM. We can have a relationship between two system entities, in other words, out-of-the-box entities such as account and contact. That would be a system-to-system relationship. There are a number of system-to-system relationships involving account and contact. For instance, the parent company field on a contact is a many-to-one between the contact and the account. However, the primary contact is exactly the opposite, where the contact is the primary and account is the secondary. Another example would be the relationship between a case and a contact. We can also have a system-to-customer relationship, which we'll get into in detail later, but it's a special case that Microsoft has provided to allow CRM to support both business-to-business and business-to-consumer marketing models. We can also create relationships between system entities and custom entities, such as a one-to-many and a many-to-many. And an example of this would be if we created a custom entity called project and then created a relationship where the account was the one and project was the many. We can also flip that around and have a custom to system relationship. So we could create a distributor entity, for instance, and associate it as the primary over accounts so that you could associate accounts with a particular distributor. We can also have custom to custom, so we can create a number of custom entities and create relationships between them. And finally, the self-referential relationship. And this is a one-to-many relationship with the same entity in both primary and related roles of the relationship. This is used for creating tree hierarchies and cloning records and the like. The dynamic CRM customer relationship is a special relationship for out-of-box entities that's designed to enable dynamic CRM to support different business models, either business to consumer or business to business. There's many out-of-box examples for this, including opportunity, quotes, orders, invoices, and cases. It's actually two relationships programmatically linked together as one. And it basically includes a many-to-one to the account as well as a many-to-one to the contact. And this cannot be replicated using supported customizations. This is strictly something that Microsoft provides, but is not available for customizing. So now let's take a moment and take a closer look at an opportunity to customer relationship. So first of all, let's take a look at the potential customer field and see how it reacts within the form when we're working it. So if we go and we click on the lookup icon to the right of potential customer, this brings up a lookup box which is set to look up at accounts, but it will actually let me go and look up either in contacts or in accounts. So it's very simple for me to go ahead and choose one or the other and go ahead and double click. And if you'll notice, now my potential customer is a contact rather than an account. But this is very easy to change. And so there we have it. So that's what it looks like from the user perspective. But now let's take a look at the opportunity and see how that's actually been implemented. So I'll go and click on Customize. And I will customize the entity. And now within the entity, we want to drill down to relationships. Now, since the opportunity is the many in this relationship, I will click on the N to 1 to get at it from that direction. So then if we go ahead and drill down, you'll notice there are two relationships that are considered parental to this, and they both say potential customer as the field name. And so basically this is how Microsoft has tried to make it easier for us to use. Rather than providing two separate relationships that force us to pick both an account and a contact or have an empty field in play, what we're able to do is to go ahead and have a single field on the form, which is known as the potential customer, then use the options of the drop-down list to select whether we want to associate this opportunity with an account or a contact. And that's how the potential customer relationship works. All right, so let's talk a moment about unsupported relationships. As I mentioned earlier, the customer relationships are special, and so we're not supported to create a custom customer relationship. If we need to do that, we have to do that with code or do that with multiple lookup fields. This is a special relationship employed within the out-of-box entities that's designed to enable the business-to-consumer or business-to-business business model without having to do much in the way of alterations to CRM forms. There's many out-of-box examples as we discussed before. It's used in the opportunity, the quote, the order, the invoice, and the case. And again, it cannot be replicated using supported customizations. The other thing it's not currently supported is one-to-one relationships. These are not available as a direct relationship using out-of-the-box tools, but it can be simulated, either using a single one-to-N that you only associate one record with, or a pair of interlocking relationships, a one-to-N and an N-to-1. But you would need to use a workflow or plugin to enforce some business rules to make sure that these interlocking relationships continue to be interlocked. So let's take some time to discuss the one-to-N or one-to-many relationships, the one of the three different relationships directly supported by CRM 2011. This is a relationship between a primary entity to a related entity. The relationship creates a new relationship attribute in the related entity, and this is the link or foreign key to the primary record. The related entity shows up in the navigation pane of the primary entity, and you can configure appearance and location in the pane. One-to-N relationships support attribute mapping, which we'll cover later in this segment. And we can also define cascading behavior from the one to the many, depending upon whether or not we have parental or referential relationship defined. N-to-one relationships. An N-to-one or many-to-one is the same as a one-to-N, but just accessed from the opposite direction. So you're looking at it from the many side instead of the one side. So this is a relationship from the related entity to the primary entity, and the only difference is perspective. For example, in a one-to-N relationship between account and contact, the account is primary, and the contact is the related entity. In an N-to-one relationship between contact and account, the account is primary, and the contact is related again. It's the same relationship. You're just looking at it from a different perspective. One-to-N relationship behavior. One-to-many relationships can cascade certain actions on a primary entity record to the related entity records. This determines what happens to related records when events happen to the primary record, including an assignment of the primary record, or deactivate or delete. Parental relationships can cascade, and an entity can have only one parental relationship. The parent is the primary entity, or the one, and the child is the related entity, and the many. The cascading behavior would suggest that, for instance, if you have an account and you delete the account, that it would also delete all the contacts if the relationship between account and contacts was defined to be parental. Referential relationships do not cascade, but they do have some special relationship behavior. One-to-N relationship rules. You have four options when you're trying to configure the relationship rules. You can choose parental, which cascades any assignments, shares, unshares, reparents, and deletes down through the relationship. You can also set up configurable cascading, which allows the above cascades to be individually set as needed. You can also have a referential relationship where no cascading is supported at all, and if you were to delete the parent record, the child record could be orphaned. And finally, there's referential restrict delete. There's no cascading supported. However, the delete of a linked primary record is prevented until all related records of that relationship are unlinked. Therefore, if I had a referential restrict delete on contact under an account, I could not delete an account until all of the contacts were either deleted or pointed at a different record. Okay, enough of the dry stuff. Let's go ahead and talk about a one-to-N relationship example. So here's an example, as you can see, within the account entity, one-to-N relationship, and this is a relationship between account and case, with account as the primary entity and case as the related entity. If I go ahead and open this, I now see the form for defining the relationship. And these are the areas that we just went through in the last couple of slides. We can see that we have defined a primary entity and a related entity. We also have a schema name assigned to the relationship. The lookup field. This lookup field has been created within the case entity, and it's called customer. And it is a requirement level of system required, and the schema name of the lookup field is customer ID. So while this would appear within the case, within the primary entity or the account, we need to determine where we want the case to appear. So first of all, in our display options, we've chosen that we wanted to use the plural name, or cases, and that we want to display this in the service area in display order 10. I have some other options here where I can choose to put a manual label. I can choose not to display the related entity in the navigation pane at all. And then finally, down at the bottom, relationship behavior, and in this particular case, it's set up as parental, which causes a cascade all to happen on assign, share, unshare, reparent, delete, and merge. So now let's talk about a native many-to-many relationship. The end-to-end or many-to-many relationship is a relationship between two related entities, which means there is no primary entity. We also do not have any attribute mapping support, and there's no cascading behavior because there can never be a parent. Each related entity appears within the navigation pane of the other entity. However, that is customizable and optional. A hidden intersect entity is created automatically when you create a native many-to-many relationship. And basically, its job is to contain the links to the two records. It cannot be customized, and it is not accessible in any workflows. So basically, we know it exists, but we can't touch it. Now here's an example of a native many-to-many. So in this particular case, we are still in the account entity, but now we're into many-to-many relations. There are two many-to-many relationships already defined out of the box. One is between the lead and the account entity, and the other is between the marketing list and the account entity. The form looks like this. As you can see, it's a little bit different from the one-to-many relationship. In this particular case, we have the current entity and the other entity. These relationships can also be seen from either side, and it doesn't matter which side you're pursuing it from. So we have the entity name and our display option. In this particular case, the display option is do not display. So this relationship will not appear on the navigation pane of the account entity. However, it does appear with the marketing list entity.